Hi, welcome to another episode of the Burning Desire. And today I'm with, is it Olivier Muller? Is that correct?
Oliver.
Oh God, as if I'd made that. My middle name's Oliver, for goodness sakes. Oliver Muller, correct?
Yeah.
I normally asked before, but we were talking for about
No,
half.
no worries. All my French-speaking friends call me Olivier, but my name is Oliver.
Is that an English origin or parents or anything?
No, no, my parents are of Austrian origin. My father passed away, but anyways, my mother is Austrian, and that's why it's Oliver. And she was always upset when my friends at school were calling me Olivier, and she said, "No, no, 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 it's Oliver,
Nice.
Oliver Ralph Muller."
Well, my father, I'm sure this is true. I need to ask him this evening again, but my mother wanted me to be called Oliver Charles Burns, and my father changed it at the registry office to Charles Oliver Burns. I believe that's true. Which, if you knew my father, which one day I'm sure you'll meet him, like you'd realize that probably is true. Like,
I'll come to Manchester when the Tyson Fury box is maybe the last time.
nice. Yeah, this is great. This is a fantastic city. I say that as it's typical Manchester weather, grey and rainy. But if you're okay with that, with someone that's lived here for 30 plus years, pretty much all my life, it doesn't bother me. And I'm not a big fan of the sun anyway. I don't mind it, but like I'm not a beach guy. So for me, I don't know. I say this to people all the time. I think it's a fantastic country. I think within the country, it's a fantastic city. And I think if you have visited here, recently you'd realize that there's something going on economically for another discussion for another day. But what I do want to talk about, because as I said to you in the probably 20 odd minutes we were chatting before we recorded, uh, your career is unbelievable. I mean, every this happens every time I do these podcasts where I look at the headline of what the guest does, and in your case, it's the Morgan Stanley report that kind of piqued my curiosity. And for those that aren't in the industry, will come across that hopefully at the end of this or some part of the interview. It's pretty much the most important barometer of where the industry is, the movers and shakers, who's selling what in a very notoriously closed industry, which doesn't like to tell anyone anything. And it's probably the only industry in the world, I would say, that loves to tell people they're doing less production than they actually are. There's no everyone else in AI or banking, like, oh, we had a great quarter and they overstate. With the watch business, we made more money, but we sold less watches.
True. I might have one or two anecdotes on that linked to Laurent Ferrier, but
Well, go
we
for it. Listen, just throw it in. Like, just go for it.
so shall I start? Shall I introduce myself?
Yeah. Listen, so as I say, there's no real structure to this. I always lead with the Steve Jobs quote, which is that you can't connect dots going forwards, only backwards. And so
Okay.
I always like to understand the way I like to do this to start with is just to learn, when you were a kid, you talked about your name, of course. Were you studious? Were you academic? What sort of a kid were you in school? Did you enjoy school? Did you hate school?
Shall I start with that? I
Yeah.
was not very good at school. I was not really interested and got rather easily distracted with other things than studying. Um, no, I what I liked at school is were the breaks.
Yeah.
And no, apart from that, I like numbers. That's why I'm doing that report. I like a lot numbers, but I'm also we'll talk later on that the fast forward to the watch industry. I love the product. I love the people making the product. I love the people really doing the work, not all the fancy side of our industry where sometimes people think that they are more important than the brands they are managing or the products that they are creating.
Well, it's
uh,
amazing because on that note, I always think of this with like an Elon Musk. you've never heard Elon Musk ever talk about anyone at any of the companies that he operates. He makes it sound like it's him, like doing everything in every single company that he operates, you know? And there are
Yeah,
people in our industry that are all the exact same. You need a visionary, you need a leader, but like at the same time, a company is far more than just one person. Even if, like in
abs
my business, it is,
yeah,
I've decided I got to a point where I got rid of all my staff, but it is just me. There's still like, other people that are involved, people that introduce business to you, people that make your business cards. Like, there's always other people involved with stuff, right? And yeah, I think you're right. There's too much in today's world, or especially in our industry, where one individual takes the all the credit
credit.
for all the work.
Yeah, he shares only the failures. Uh, that's
Yeah,
very,
yeah, yeah,
very often the case. So yeah, the watch industry, it started almost 30 years ago in 97 at Omega Swatch Group.
yeah.
It was a good time because the brand was restarting because it almost died in the 1980s due to the quartz crisis, and then it was revived. And when I joined in 97, there was a an industry legend there trying to bring new dynamics into that brand, and fantastic brand, Jean-Claude Biver. And he was not officially the CEO, but he was the guy basically managing the whole brand.
And that was
Uh,
Amiga, right?
Pardon me?
And that was Amiga, the brand.
Yeah, Omega. Yeah, yeah. Fantastic. We grew very strongly. We had growth rates of 25-30% a year. So everybody was happy running around. In fact, fun fact, when I started, I replaced a guy who moved on to the sales part of the company. And that guy is now the CEO of that brand, still there, Reinald Eschliman,
Wow.
still a friend. And then I did all kind of, I worked at a precious metal refiner after that,
Yeah,
where
Metalor.
we manufactured the Vertu phones made of gold and platinum and all this. Then I moved, that's another fun fact. Then I moved on to Chopard. And the guy who got me into Chopard, he is called Jean-Frédéric Dufour, and he is now the boss of Rolex. But back
Wow.
then, he was just a friend.
That's
He got me to,
wild.
pardon me?
That's wild, eh?
Yeah, that's why. That's a small industry. Everyone knows each other.
What's your
Uh,
relationship with him now, or is he just a busy guy that you don't really see?
He's still a friend, but it
Yeah.
becomes complicated now. He's at the helm of the number one of the Swiss watch industry. It's difficult. You can't even go for lunch together because you're almost certain. I always remember when I met him one day back then, he was the CEO of Zenith. And we met by coincidence at Basel World, and he said, "Come on, let's walk together." And we walked to the fair, and we crossed one or two journalists, and I always remember how the journalists looked at us and thought, "Oh, why are they together?" etc. So it's very small. Everybody looks what the other is doing, etc. And from Chopard, I had a dream, which was to found my own brand, and that became Villemont, which I launched in 2005, which lived for 5 years. Then came the financial crisis, etc. Was an incredible experience, both as an entrepreneur and also as in marketing, product development, sales, etc., etc. I learned a lot. I did many things wrong, but now we come to the interesting part. Then, when the lights went off because my main investor said, "Listen, I lost a lot of money here and there, and it was financial crisis, etc., etc." And then I started consulting. I started advising people, and a few months later, half a year later, I had two friends of mine calling me And those were the guys who founded La Fabrique du Temps, which is now Louis Vuitton.
Wow, that's
And back
wild.
then,
That's wild.
it's a wild world. No, it's a true story. One day, one of the two, Michel Navas, who is now, the god of watchmaking at La Fabrique du Temps, he calls me and he says, "What are you up to?" I say, "Well, I do this, I do that. What are you doing this afternoon?" I say, "Well, working." Why? Say, "Could you drive to Geneva? We have something to show to you." And that something was the watch of Laurent Ferrier. And I met Laurent, whom I knew from before, from Patek, where he had worked for 37 years.
Yep.
And I looked at the watch and I said, wow, that's wow. And it was the tourbillon double hairspring,
It's a crazy watch. I've seen his personal piece. It's amazing.
amazing piece. And
For those that
as
don't know, can you explain what Laurent Ferrier did at Patek?
yeah, Laurent Ferrier started. First of all, he did the watchmaking school. Then he started out at Patek as a watchmaker for prototypes. You have to people forget that back then Patek was a very small company, and then he moved on to be a product designer. He was in charge of product development. He worked very closely with the father of Thierry Stern, Philippe Stern, who was back then the CEO and owner of the company. They worked very closely. And Laurent always told me that he learned a lot with Mr. Stern, who was always telling him that designing was not about adding things, but taking things away to find a very distinctive product signature. And Laurent is the most talented and gifted watch designer I have ever worked with, and I have worked with quite a few ones
Mm,
whom I respect, but none of them has the talent that Laurent has, really. And besides, he's a nice man and
it's lovely.
very
I've met him
soft
too.
spoken, and
It's
yeah, very, very
I,
nice man.
I, I, I said this to you before the call, and people that know me know this is absolutely true. That of the there's there's three watches on my kind of agenda to I say to acquire next, but then what keeps happening is because what I do, something comes in, I'm like, oh God, I got to keep that one as well. But the three that are kind of on my agenda, one is the Breguet Tradition for obvious reasons. The I love the retrograde blue, the most recent one. It's just will come to this as well, but I believe every retail price near enough is double what it should be for most of the main brands. So a £40,000 Breguet should be 20k, is my opinion. And when it's 20k, I'll buy it. Um, I looked at obviously the Langham one's a great watch, but long story short, the brand that we're creating, the Müller brand, which I'll come to another time, but really for me satisfies that itch what we're going to make, if that makes sense, in that kind of way. But the number one, and again, you could ask anyone this, I hark on about this. I've got the book, and I'll prove it behind me, is Laurent
Yeah.
Ferrier. Look, I'll show you. I have a bookshelf. It has every brand, and one of the main ones is there. There you go. I'm not lying.
Ah,
I'm not lying.
excellent.
So
Nice.
yeah, I'm not lying. And here I've got Peaceman, Bedard, Vianney, Holter, like hand signed things. Look, like like hand signed from Vianney, and you'll like this one too. I think as a watch guy, this is a dial from Ludovic Valois. So I'm a watch guy. But Laurent Ferrier, when I first saw the brand, I think it was Watches and Wonders or something. Even though I think it might have been the watch days before they even did Watch and Wonders or something. I don't remember where exactly I first saw Laurent Ferrier, but I saw it and I've got an eye for these things. And I'm like, that is a fucking watch. That's just like, to me, it's what Patek should be. And I think it's lost quite a bit, in my personal opinion. And that's why the vintage Pateks are going crazy. The modern ones, not so much. But when
Yeah,
it's
in fact, it's, that the Laurent has that Patek Philippe DNA in his blood, and at the beginning I had a hard time to tell him you're not at Patek anymore, because when journalists, somewhere because at the beginning they were always referring to his 37 years at
Sure,
Patek Philippe.
sure.
And then he always said, we talking about Patek. And I always said, Laurent, you're not anymore with them. But of course, the whole product, it's strongly influenced by his 37 years at Patek. And yes, then we started that adventure. But again, it was what I'm going to tell you is the true story because I heard, that's the funny part of it. I heard people recently talk about how they participated in the launch of Laurent Ferrier. I've never met those people, by the way, but anyway, it's true, huh?
No,
And then
listen,
he
it's not surprising to me because we talked again. It wasn't recorded, and it should have been, but we had a little of a discourse, and I was saying to you, like, unfortunately, in today's world, there's so much fakery. What is made in Switzerland, made in France?
true.
What does luxury mean? What are these prices about? Are they just throwing a dart? I think they are, and putting a zero on the end and seeing which idiot buys it, and then
Yeah.
not worrying about the secondary value because whatever, whatever. And likewise, back to your story, people saying they're involved with things. Because of my position and in Manchester as well, and I'm well known in these things. People come and see me all the time, right? I'll have two meetings a day with various people on various things. The amount of bullshit that I hear, I was involved with this £100 million thing. I'm like, so why aren't you on Google then? Like, why aren't you, if you're so, like, why aren't you, like, where's your money then? If, like, if you did a deal for 100 million, oh, well, what happened? No, bullshit. Like, you know what I mean? So there are some examples where that's not quite true and it isn't whatever. And I give people enough rope to hang themselves on. And it's like, okay, but I'm gonna call you about something where you should have the contacts for that because you said he did. But all of a sudden now, oh, Anyway, carry on. But I hear this all the time.
So, yeah, so basically it started like anything else than you have learned at business school. So there was no business plan, no marketing plan, no clear view about what Laurent Ferrier, the brand, would become. They thought they had created a brand, but in fact, they had a product, they
Yeah,
had a man with a white beard,
yeah.
and and Michel and Enrico and Laurent's son, Christian.
So
So
did Laurent Ferrier leave Patek to start the brand, or he leave to
yes,
retire and then okay, he needs to start the
no,
brand?
he be the story goes and that's a true story. The story goes Laurent was an excellent amateur racing car driver, and he finished third in 1989 at Le Mans,
Yeah.
third overall with a Porsche 935 Promer, etc. He was a very excellent driver, and his fellow driver who financed the whole team said to him, by the way, the second of the race was Paul Newman, the actor
That's
and
fucking
amateur racing car driver.
crazy.
It's all true, huh?
Who won the race?
And 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 the guy said to Laurent, no, Laurent offered him a Patek Philippe because he was so happy, engraved, da da dam, and it was a Nautilus, but with a quartz movement. But anyways, it was a Nautilus, and the guy was so happy, and every time he would wear that watch and go to a dinner, everyone would tell him, Mister da da dam, those Patek, they are very hard to find, blah blah blah. And that guy, who was an entrepreneur, he knew nothing about watches, but he was always telling Laurent, we have to launch our brand. And finally, he managed to convince him. Laurent, he was then 62, 63 years old, so just short before retirement. And he convinced him to start the brand, and then they developed a product, and that product was made. And then I was called in by my two friends who had developed the movement and worked very closely with Laurent. They knew each other because the three of them had worked together at Patek Philippe.
Oh,
That's the story. And I meet the investor, and that's a true story. The guy tells me, Michel and Enrico told me that you could sell ice creams to Eskimos, the usual stories. You're a good salesman, ba ba bam, bi ba boom. Would you like to work with us? And I said, yes, sir. But what's the project? Is it a brand? Is it a one-off? Is it a father and son story?
Yeah,
Just
yeah. What am I
and the
selling?
guys replies in a very blunt way. He says, I have no F clue. Just sell me 12 tourbillons. Once you have done this, we talk again. I get out of this meeting, and any reasonable man, what does he do? He calls his wife and he says, listen, I had this meeting. I don't know what to think about it. And then your wife tells you trust Michel and Enrico, so the product works. I say, yes, I trust them. The product works. I say, so what risk are you taking? I say, you're right. So we start working. Next day, I was on it, and I had to figure out the storytelling. I had to figure out what the branding would be, and so on and so on and so on. And we started traveling. At the beginning, Laurent came 1 or 2 times with me to the US, etc. And he didn't like to travel, didn't speak English anyway. So the whole thing, starts just in a way that you would never teach any business student at any business school. We won the GPHG, Grand Prix d'Horlogerie de Genève, first year. We win the prize. We start selling,
That's
etc.
the Oscars of the watch world, for those who don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a big word, but we were over the moon to win that prize, and then everything starts aligning really in a nice way, and it was a fantastic story. And what I took from my own story when I had my brand, I was totally at Laurent Ferrier was totally focused on sales, on, first thing in the morning. Did any client send an email? Does anyone need any information, etc.? Because afterwards, I'm going to tell you 1 or 2 anecdotes about other artisan watchmakers who
Yeah,
never reply to any email or any call. So
yeah.
that was my first thing in the morning, and things starts, going very well, and I can say in the independent artisan watchmaking segment. It's one of the success stories of the last 15 or 20 years. So I was very happy with that. I was advising them. I became a shareholder, then I left, and then I started advising other people. I worked with Beat Haldeman, who is not so well known, but he's a very clever guy. And that's the funny part. When I joined, one of my clients, a collector, he immediately calls me up and he says, Oliver, could you do me a favor? I said, yes, what is it? He says, well, I sent a few emails, the first one about 1.5 years ago to Mr. Haldeman. He didn't even reply to it. And he says, I apologize. I just want to buy a watch from him. Could you look after it? I asked Beat, and I say, Beat, do, do, do you remember ever receiving an email by a gentleman? Da, 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 dum? And he says, oh, yes. I say, "Well, why didn't you reply? Well, we have enough orders." But yeah, say, Beat, you could
Fucking hell.
tell him, I have too many orders, I can't fulfill. Thank you very much. We will put you on a list if you
Yes,
want to, etc.
yes, yes.
So that was one. I worked with a young guy called Rexhep Rexhepi,
Oh wow.
and that's another story. That's another funny story. I have a friend in London called Silas Walton of A Collected Man,
Yep.
and he was always talking about that young guy in Geneva, so talented, who needed to be advised, on business, etc. And they said, yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm going. maybe one day if I have some spare time, I'll meet with that guy. And back it was 2017, I was living in London. So I said, okay, next time I'm in Geneva, I go and see Rexhep. Well, and then there was another man, very well known in our business and very, very good and very successful, called Michael Tay, who is the owner and manager of the Hourglass in Singapore, big retail network
Yeah.
who does Patek, Rolex, and who has done many good things for the independents. And one morning he asked me, it was watch auctions in Geneva, and he says, well, Oliver, what are you doing currently? And I said, well, I'm advising him and her. Blah. He says, you know what? You should look after the next generation. And I said, okay, who is that? And he says, Rexhep Rexhepi, Raoul Pages, and I don't remember whom else.
Raul Pages, they're both those guys are phenomenal.
And I said, okay, one, two, tell me the same story about the guy. Okay, I'll meet Rexhep. And when I met with him, he's a very nice guy. He has a lot of charisma, etc. Talented watchmaker, very friendly face, etc. And I listened to his story. The guy was nowhere, lost in translation, and basically, I told him I can't teach you anything about watchmaking. I am passionate about watches, about the history of watchmaking, but I won't be able to teach you anything. So, but I can maybe help you a little bit to have a better storytelling and, and why do you sign your watches with such an ugly name? I didn't say ugly. I was nicer back then. I said Acrivia. Why Acrivia? It sounds like, yeah, because it's a ancient Greek, it means precision. Are you Greek? What's the story with your brand about the
Yeah,
the the
signaling.
origins of watchmaking? Okay, from Greece, I understand. I'm with you, but the name, why don't you sign with your own name? No, 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 no. I can't do that. I'm from Kosovo. My name doesn't sound right, etc. Said Rexhep. You're Rexhep Rexhepi. It's your name. There's nothing wrong with it. And then maybe a few weeks later, we go together to London. I was there. He came. He was delivering a watch to a passionate watch collector. It was still an Acrivia. And in front of Rexhep, I asked the guy, what do you think if Rexhep would sign his watches with his own name? And the guy goes, he was an American guy, a lawyer living in London. And he says, that's excellent. Of course he should do that. And Rexhep goes, no, but my name sounds wrong. He said, no, it's a cool name, Rexhep Rexhepi.
Yeah.
Fast forward, he develops a new product, very nice, with his brother. They do that chronomètre contemporain. We come to Basel World, and then, and the funny part of it, again, that's those funny anecdotes, is when I said to some friends who were very knowledgeable watch collectors, I'm not going to call names, but
Yeah.
one of them told me, I know he's a nice guy, but the way he finishes the movements, it's not so, the same guy 6 months later was knocking on the door, I want one, etc. The first time I spoke with a journalist about Rexhep, that guy told me, Mr. Müller, I have a lot of respect for your knowledge about watches, etc. But a guy from Kosovo who has worked at Patek now doing his own brand, no, Mr. I'm sorry. Same New York Times, they were nicer, but it took me 1 year to get an article for Rexhep. And then from then on, he became the star that he is today. I'm very happy for him, by the way. He's very talented. He's very clever. He knows He knows very well what watch collectors want to see and hear from him. He worked at François Paul Journe, so he knows how that works, to be precious, rare, not accessible for everyone. And yeah, and then I worked with Peterman Beda for a short while. I
Hold that
worked with.
thought 1 second. Hold that thought.
Now you
Because
get me the next book.
yeah, no, this is an anecdote that I have to tell you. You see this?
Yeah,
So I met Florian and what's his? I can't remember what's his other first name? It's Florian Bada and
and Peterman, Gael Peterman.
Gael. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I know Florian better than Gael. So I said every time I meet someone like this, I'm like, hey, it'd be cool to. We're both running to another meeting. It'd be cool to have something signed, right? So they sent me this, very nice,
Okay.
and signed here. Yeah,
Yeah.
great. I said, look, ship it to me. Obviously, I'll pay the shipping, no problem. They ship it to me. This is what it is. This is what they shipped, okay? And they billed me 150 francs. I'm like, guys, are you shipping me a fucking watch? Like, what the fuck are you shipping? So it arrives, and I'm like, this typical, and I tell them to the face, it's typical watch, like, just no business sense. Just put a stamp on it. Like, what are you doing? So that's my Peter and Badass story. So I've been to their workshop. I know those guys, super nice.
It's very, I tell you, it's very seldom that you find a good watchmaker with the sense of business.
Yeah.
One of them is Kari Voutilainen.
Oh yeah.
He's a very good businessman.
Yeah.
But besides being a very nice man,
I've not
he's
met
one
him
of
yet,
the
actually. It's one
very
of the
few.
guys I've not met yet.
Pardon me?
I've not come across
You have
him
not
yet.
met him. Okay.
Oh
He's
yeah.
very successful. He's very clever again. He knows the role he has to play, etc. But
Yeah.
he's also a very good businessman. And that's very seldom because most of the time you have people passionate. Vianney, yeah, well,
Right.
I don't have to explain. He's
Yeah.
more of a dreamer and a poet
Yeah.
than a businessman or an entrepreneur.
Correct.
And then you have Philippe Dufour, another. Philippe tells you stories, one quick about Philippe Dufour. It took him 12 years to deliver the 200 Simplicity from the first series. 12 years. I say, Philippe, how did you manage to take 12 years? He said, well, I was not good at building up a team. So everyone I would hire, they would stay at the longest, maybe 4 years, leave again. Then I had to retrain the next one, etc., etc. So yeah.
He's something.
So my work is not only many people, of course, the Morgan Stanley report gave me a lot of brand awareness for my own business and my person. But the most of my work, not most, but a lot of my work is about building up brands, launching them. Sometimes I'm visible, sometimes I'm not. I'm working with big brands, then I'm not visible at all, of course.
Yep.
But most of the time it's small, niche, artisan. I'm currently working with the next star of the artisan watchmakers, which is Luca Soprana, based in Switzerland. Luca is not such a young guy. He's beginning, he's 50, 51. He has worked a long time in the back office of watchmaking, developing movements, etc. And
Yeah.
he
I'm already following him. I
you
thought,
do, you
yeah,
do. You
already.
should,
Well, look, I
you
proved it to you.
should,
Look,
you
see?
should. And I have good news for you.
Yep.
Um, There is a very good designer working alongside with him, and you will soon see new things coming from Luca Soprana, which are even better and even more refined than what he has done so far. So yes, so and then yeah, I'm working on different projects. I do private label, but always high end. Yeah.
So tell me, I'm going to pull it up in a second, and just go through this a bit because clearly you being someone that writes the report, or certainly
Yep.
to start with, like how did you get involved with that report? Did Morgan Stanley reach out to you? Did you reach out to them? Like how does it even come to be?
Morgan Stanley, they reached out to me because in 2017, the guy there is a French guy working in London from Morgan Stanley, Edouard Robin. He had the very good idea of doing a report on the watch industry, and he probably tried to knock on a few doors, realizing that it's a very closed industry. And he had the very good idea of trying to find someone who seemed to be part of the game.
Yeah,
And he
one of the
had read
Illuminati.
my, pardon me?
One of the Illuminati.
Exactly. And he came across my name a few times, being quoted in newspapers, and then he we met in Geneva. It was so funny because he we met in Geneva, but we were both living in London. So we agreed on the meeting in Geneva, which was at Rexhep's atelier back then, and we agreed to collaborate together. And it's a huge bank, it's a huge institution, obviously, but the collaboration is very straightforward, very easy, and our goal with that report is basically, what many people don't understand is that the report is intended for the clients of the bank, which are institutional investors, private equity fund, hedge funds, sovereign funds, etc., banks, who are interested to invest in the watch industry through listed companies mainly.
Mhm.
The private equity funds are looking for investment targets, but mostly people are interested to know what we think about Richemont, LVMH, and Swatch Group, of course, the few listed companies. And the anomaly of the watch industry is that, unlike any other segment of the luxury industry, privately owned companies perform a lot better than the listed companies. And that's very intriguing for them. And the purpose of this report for the clients of the bank, because in the industry, many people think that we do that report for the watch industry, and we don't. We do it for the clients of the bank mainly, so that they understand the industry. And we to bring light into that very dark black box, we decided that we would highlight the dynamics of the brand by calculating their market shares on a retail value. Why? Because all the reports before the Morgan Stanley report were comparing Apple with peers. Why? Because you have a brand like Richard Mill selling 100% D2C, direct to consumer, and then you had a brand like Rolex selling 100% through wholesale. So the two turnovers couldn't be compared because obviously the turnover of Richard Mill was at retail value, whereas
Yeah.
at Rolex you consolidate the sales through your subsidiaries. And back then, there was only one Rolex, one brand owned Rolex boutique in the world, which was the one in Geneva. Now it changed a little bit with the acquisition of Bucherer. So we decided to convert, and how we do this, we figure out the discount given to the retailer or the distributor at the wholesale level, and we figure out the whole the business model at this stage. and the discounts, etc. And then we convert the sales made by the brand into retail value, and then we calculate the retail market shares.
And I saw quite fresh off the press that is it? I saw that Tudor were trying to sue you, or sue not sue you, sue the report, which I don't know if that's true or just hearsay. And then I saw that Swatch Group, when I was just looking up something, are also not happy with the report. And that's one thing. Second thing is the data. Like, have you just got back channels where you can access roughly where it is, or are you using your expert guesstimation as to where you think things are? Because clearly, as you mentioned, most of these companies are private. Um, so how's the data being collected? And even the public companies are pretty much bloody private. I mean, you can't figure out what's going on anyway.
Sure. Yeah, I'll get into that. First of all, no one is suing us,
Right, it's
as
just nonsense.
to what I know as of today. Neither the bank nor me or my company, Luxeconsult. Why? Because there is nothing to be sued, or
It's
so
not.
there is
I read it
no
and I thought it doesn't make any
legal.
sense. It's a great headline, but it doesn't make any sense.
It absolutely. That's the point. It doesn't make any sense because there is nothing to be sued for. Anyway, so that's the first point. Yes, Swatch Group was very disappointed to say the least, and so was Tudor, Rolex B brand. I'll say a few words about that. The one thing I can't talk about is that useless open letter from Swatch Group to Morgan Stanley, because I'm not Morgan Stanley. So on that part, no comment. But I
No.
will comment on Swatch Group's performances. That's not a problem. So how do I get the numbers? There is a lot of estimates, of course, but there is a huge network. I have been working in that industry for 30 years now. So I know a few people. I have very good intel. I'm not pretending that our report is scientifically proven right at
Yeah.
100%.
If you
Those
had
are
to,
est
if you had to guesstimate, like how accurate it is it 80%, 60%? You just don't know. You just
you know,
your best idea.
basically there are, even as you rightfully said, even with listed companies like Richemont, they are not obliged to publish any number at brand level. That's the first thing. So they have no legal obligation to say how much they make with Cartier or Vacheron or Panerai. Thing is, there are some groups like Richemont or LVMH, where the watch business, by the way, is Mickey Mouse business. It's not that it's not good, huh? They are fine brands. I'm not saying that it's not good, but they
Well,
are
it's up
not,
to them.
they don't care so much. It's
Yeah,
not so sensitive.
right.
Then you have private companies who have no obligation in Switzerland to publish whatever soever. So Audemars Piguet, Patek, etc., they don't have to publish. And in the first place, Rolex, owned by a trust, the Wilsdorf Foundation. But I get some good intel, and from, year after year, we started in 2018, so it was on the 2017 numbers. Now we have published the report number 9, the ninth Swiss Watches report. And year after year, we have more people coming to us before we publish, and they want to talk. Why? Because they have understood that the report, even though some people like Mr. Hayek would like to make the whole world know that it's useless, it's or everything is wrong. Well, the only thing I can say here is that the one number that can't be wrong is the consolidated sales of Swatch Group, because they have to publish it.
And
They're
if it is
listed.
wrong, you've got a massive problem with the SEC.
That's the problem. And when consolidated, you are at minus 5.9%,
Mm.
which Swatch Group was year on year
Mm.
at current FX rates.
Yeah.
Then you can't pretend that all your 16 brands achieved growth because, I'm not very good at accounting, finances, figures,
There
but
was a one-off 500 million pound payment paid to his daughter that he can't tell you about. That was like,
so, well, so that's the point. And Tudor, maybe I was a little bit wrong, but I don't think I was that wrong. And Rolex is not complaining. Look at how many are not complaining, and
yeah.
look at how many
Uh,
are
The
complaining.
funny thing is, there's one way which this is what I would say back to them, which I'm sure you probably do. It's very simple. Okay, tell us the numbers then. If they're wrong, tell us the numbers. What have you got to hide? You know?
That
I can't. Hold on a second. Let's just.
that point exactly.
Sorry,
And
you
and
just
our
broke off a
role
second.
is not unlike what some people. Pardon me?
You just broke off a second. So when I just said tell us the numbers and you said something,
Yeah.
it broke off.
So the point here is it's not so much that's a very important statement I'm going to make. I'm not saying that we are not putting a lot of energy, expertise, network, everything, Um, but the point is, I want to be as precise as possible, okay? But the most important thing that we want to show with this report, and that's what financial industry reports are about, is to show market dynamics. And if you look at market dynamics, you see the people growing, performing well year after year with a strategy, a vision, etc. And you have the ones performing not so well. That's the point. My point is not saying that I know the number of Audemars Piguet at the precise 1 Swiss francs. By the way, that's the one number I am 99% 99999 sure that the number we published is very, very near the truth for certain reasons. And people smart enough to check my profile on LinkedIn will instantly understand why I dare to say this. Okay. So they had just to look at the posts and then they will quickly understand, connect the dots why I'm saying this. And then there are many other brands which communicate openly, because after that letter by Swatch Group, um, many people, many journalists try to say everything is wrong because that's the purpose of someone trying to bully you or to discredit you
Mhm.
is that they take one part and they say, this is wrong, so everything is wrong.
Credits everything. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But apart from that, it's I think the most valuable report, industry report on the watch industry. It's not perfect.
Hmm.
Can we improve? Certainly we can, and we are improving year after year. I'm always also explaining to people that we may amend over year the figures if we get new intel, and we are writing it. We are totally transparent about this. If you take the latest issue of the Morgan Stanley report, you will see on page 23 that we have the methodology explained. We are totally transparent about what we do and what we don't do. We are explaining that in the watch industry, there is no Nielsen panel where you receive data from distributors, etc. There are a few
There
data.
was a
Pardon
slight
me?
caveat. There's a slight caveat to that, which was I don't know if it still exists, but in the UK, we used to, as a company, because I said to you before, my family have been in the watch business for 70 years. There was a time where they collected, I think it wasn't Nielsen, Cantor, one of these, I forget which, they did collect the actual till receipts from Branson, which was an EPOS system and a few others. And I remember that report would come out, and the thing that struck me, and I wasn't as by any stretch as experienced in business or watches at all, obviously at that point, 'cause it was 20 years ago. But I recall that they used to show you like by sales value of retail, and they'd have like different brackets, and you would see back then between like £1 and £3,000, the top 20, 25 models, like 20 of them were Tag Heuer. Probably not far off today. And the thing that was the most striking though was from 5,000 to 10,000 of 25 models, all 25 are Rolex. And I remember thinking at a young age, I'm like, if that's not a monopoly, I don't know what is. Because everywhere, then you go 10 to 15 and everything's Rolex. You're like, that's interesting.
That's the point. Our point is to show how much, when you look at the last 10 years or 9 years since we started, as I said, we have done number nine now of those reports. If you look at the market dynamics, you look at how fast and how dominant Rolex is on the market, and then
Mhm.
you take Cartier, you take Audemars Piguet, Patek, Richard Mille, and very few other ones, and then you are done. Basically, the important numbers, even if some people want to criticize and say it's wrong, it's wrong, it's wrong, I always say also you can come up with your own report and then we look at each other's numbers and because people think that it's a job done in 5 minutes before we publish
That sounds
mid-Feb.
about right. Add 10% minus 5%. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like,
So
it's
the
back to what you said about Laurent Ferrier about Stern Senior saying taking away. Like, simplicity is genius, but to get simplicity takes an awful lot of work. So for you to get to that number, I know from being in business and having some intelligence that it's incredible amounts of work for you to get that list together, to figure out what's this, how does that work, what's sense check sounds about right, your 30s experience, your contacts, blah blah blah. Yeah, that's not a simple job whatsoever. I don't know if you've seen, which is interesting, talking about reports that I don't know if it's the first report, but it's the first time that I've come across the report, was the Every Watch company, who was like more of an online database of auction sales and different things. Well, they produced a report which is quite interesting, showing various things. They showed that the CPO scheme, what they
yeah,
reckon it's doing. They showed the independent space, how that's doing. The overarching comment, which I very much adhere to, being in the space for a long time, is that the secondary market, i.e., where I operate, for those who don't understand, primary is buying it from Rolex themselves or Patek themselves when it says it over the door, whatever, is that the secondary market now dictates the primary market. And that's wild because years ago, I remember when we were primary market retailers, you couldn't even get a photograph of a Watchpoint website. They'd send you a floppy disk at best. And these were brands like Hugo Boss with a watch at £200, £100. They were like, you might damage our brand by putting it on an e-commerce site. And we were very, very first as our company because I saw from Manchester there was a lot of fast fashion brands like Boohoo, which became billion-pound companies, and what's happened since. But back then they weren't as big, but they were becoming big. And the fashion space has always been 5, 7 plus years ahead of the jewelry and watch space. So it was obvious to me that e-commerce would become a thing, but no one was having that for a while. But now, as I say, brands have kind of come to realize, of course, social media is now so important, and you know how it was years ago. I mean, Richard Mill still makes me laugh. You can't take a picture of a watch in their shop on your wrist. It's like, what? Like, but you spend millions on the F1 and all these things. It's just the dumbest thing. But now people are very happy for you to go in shops, take photos, videos. In fact, they encourage it.
absolutely.
Except for, which is very interesting. I was in Rue de Rome the other week. For those who don't know, that's one of the main streets in Geneva for watches and whatever. It's very famous. and Breguet is there. Presumably, this is owned by the Swatch Group, that store, I presume. And we go in, and my friend has the Meta glasses on, right? But he has them on the top of his head on purpose to not, he's not recording the shop. Oh, our lawyers say we can't have those in our shop. And I'm like, well, he's not recording showing the security of the shop, is he? Like he's got it on his head to show you that he's not recording it. But the lawyers, it's like, but you want people to sell the watches and to like let them take photos, let them share it on social media. That's what perpetuates brands. And then maybe you've got a quick comment, because I'm cautious of your time, about how important, in my view anyway, social media, particularly Instagram, has been to the watch business. Because I don't believe, apart from maybe health, beauty, fitness, that kind of space, there's been any other industry that has been a bigger beneficiary of social media. Because a piece in Badai you would never come across as an average consumer. You would never come across the marketing spend. I mean, you've been in the business long enough to get your brand off the ground back then versus now, if you come out with a brand, is a very different beast. You get that on a few of the big collectors' hands, and years ago it was just a few collectors would share around a dinner table. Now they're taking a snap on the phone, and all of a sudden it blows up, and everyone wants one. Who can afford one, and those that can't still want one. So I don't know what your thoughts are on that and how that's changed the business.
Changed completely. Digital was a total business disruption. Um, it's for the good and the not so good sides. For the good, for the secondary market, it brought a lot of transparency because now with a few clicks you can know more or less what the price of your watch is. You can instantly sell it online. Is it good? Is it no good? I'm not commenting on that, but it brought fluidity into the market because the transactions are a lot easier, as you rightfully said before. E-commerce with outbound and reverse logistics. If you're a professional, that works very well. It's very secure. CPO is bringing trust into the market because the pieces are being authenticated by the brands themselves or by people who are knowledgeable about watches. So that's the very positive side. For new watches, it changed completely the name of the game. You know, I can remember Ben Clymer, the founder of Hodinkee, coming the first time to Basel World as a one-man show, asking shyly if he could take a few pictures of our Laurent Ferrier watch, etc. Now, Hodinkee, it's like 3.5 million unique visitors on their website per month. So it changed the way it works. It makes it possible for any guy who has just finished, graduated from watchmaking school, and that's not the so good side because everyone who more or less knows why a watch makes tick tack makes his own watch, takes a few pictures, or he doesn't even make the watch because it's artificial intelligence making the watch.
Yeah.
Then he does a few posts on Instagram, and here we go. We have all the watch collectors going crazy all over the place. It lowered the entry barrier to the market because before it was very complicated to get media coverage. So the journalists of the old days were superstars because everyone would run after Nick Fulks and Simon de Burton in the UK, or people all over the world. But there were a few that were very rare, and then you had to beg to have your watch being covered and your story being told. And that changed completely because today you have, sorry, saying this because I'm on a podcast, but you have all those idiots in front of a camera doing YouTube and talking
Are you
some
talking
people
about a coin
bad.
flip by any chance?
Pardon me?
Are you talking about the coin flip culture?
Yeah, that's yeah, all those people
Yeah,
talking brands
I know
and
exactly what
people
you mean.
bad and bashing and I'm always saying if you dislike something, okay, you can tell the whole world that you dislike it, but do it on a factual basis, and and then just stop. Don't bash on brands, etc. Because even the worst looking watch, as we think, because it's very personal,
Mm,
the
mm.
guy, he put a lot of energy, probably some of its own money, etc. So he deserves at least the respect
Yeah,
that
it's right.
you say, okay, I dislike it for a certain reason. And that's the bad side of all those
Mm.
social media, is that, everyone is a self-proclaimed watch expert. He starts talking about this and that, and he has no clue of why it's different. Then you have people, talking about why this one is a genius, etc. Sometimes I read and listen to things, not too often because it pollutes your mind, but sometimes I listen to things and say, oh my goodness, how can you be so illiterate about watchmaking, about the history of watchmaking? And but the upside is that it makes life easier for young guys or for small brands, micro brands, to launch their thing online and find their first buyers and some media coverage. And that's the good side of it. The bad side, again, is that there are now so many brands, so many people competing for the same exact customer, that it becomes complicated.
Yeah. I had this exact conversation last week with a company that I'm not going to talk about because it's not relevant, and they said the same thing. They said the air of the collector of which they're at, which is six-figure watches, is thin. And of course, there's a massive problem, and I mentioned this, I think, in the not pre-recorded piece, that my general commercial entrepreneurial business head looks at pretty much every price tag that I see in the watch business, retail I'm talking about now, which is like the primary retail prices, and think that they're double what they should be, almost without exception. I mean, Amiga, they've all just Cartier, they've all just gone, oh, well, Rolex is now at 10, so we're going to go to 7. And IWC, and they bring out they're nice enough watches, but they're 4 or 5 thousand pounds. If they were 4 or 5 thousand pounds, they'd be selling. But they're 10, 12,000 and they just sit. Or someone does buy one, and then they come to somebody like me in a year's time, and I go, I can give you two because I'm going to sell it for three or whatever the case has been. Like, but I paid 10. I don't understand. I had a client the other week who spent, Jesus, I mean, you're talking 500,000 with RWC. I think it's maybe worth 100K now, as in across a bunch of watches from, some of their higher end pieces to their ingenieur, like kind of entry level average pieces. And then, as I said just then with the Every Watch report, like what Every Watch is saying is that people like me who represent the industry in a positive way, there are lots that don't on the secondary market is grey market or secondary market dealers and are passionate, actually are able to educate people, clients, as to why are you paying 25,000 right now for a GMT Pepsi Jubilee when you could buy a Langer, you could almost get a Laurent Ferrier on the secondary now at that kind of level, etc., etc. Now, I have no problem. If that person is, I love the Pepsi, I love what it says, I love the status, there's no problem with that. But don't be under an illusion that if you have a GMT and a Daytona that you're a watch guy. Like you're not a watch guy. You're just someone that loves those, and that's cool. But like, look what else there is there. Because for 20, 25 grand, you could also buy a nice collection of five watches, one for like this, it's a few, etc., etc. But I am finding more and more with clients because I think it's the way it's everything's cyclical, that they are starting to go, well, hold on a minute. This 20-year-old, 21-year-old intern wears a Rolex, and I'm the CEO at 60, and I'm a multimillionaire, and I'm wearing the same watch, or at least the same brand. I don't like this. And then they maybe go to Patek and AP as a natural progression, But again, then they go, but everyone, when I go to a networking meeting or whatever, everyone's got the same Patek Philippe. And I think this is why the proliferation of the artisans, the real Metalor, the real stars of the hot horology show, are starting to work because people are going, actually, I really want a Simon Brett. We haven't talked about him, but I think his watches are really cool. But I like the fact that he says, I don't make very much of this. This lady makes the dial, this woman. That I'm fine with. I just don't like I was with someone the other day who talked about IWC and the fact that he educates people. He's a watchmaker by trade, and he educates people. One of the things he does at watch retail salespeople, but on the technical aspects of watches, and to help aid their sales, right? And one of them said, or a few of them, we went to IWC on a factory tour, and we saw Miguel or whomever it was at the wheel doing the Côte de Genève, and this is the one person at IWC that does this. He goes, right, okay. Did you take a stopwatch and see how long it takes to do that per movement? Because if you did, times that by 100,000 movements, do you think that's possible to do in 1 year? It's like, and this is the thing, like, don't bullshit. We talked about this, what's made in Switzerland when your case is a sapphire case from China, because we all know they're 6,000 there. It makes no sense to make them where they're 10x, whatever they cost, or whatever the case may be. And there's this big problem now because you're buying some of these watches, and watches are art, okay? But at the same time, it's difficult to justify buying certain brands at 200 grand, 300 grand, when actually, when you get bored of it, you want to move it on, you can't even get a tenth. You know what I mean? Like, that's a problem. And I think the industry needs to wake up and go, hold on a minute. One of my good friends, Martin Radkai, I'm not sure if you know about him, but he writes the Wristwatch Annual.
Yeah.
It's a really good friend of mine. In fact, he's part of the brand that I'm starting as well. So, but we talk about this like the Chinese are coming, the Japanese are coming again, like the Italians, the British. Like we're starting to go, hold on a minute. Like the reason, of course, the British didn't continue is because just didn't understand industrial. We became or kept as cottage industry. But now the world's going back to wanting things that are really handmade, really best of class and different and unique. And I think, as I say, to round the conversation. Listen, I love Rolex. I love all these brands. I think they all do great products and I'll wear them and I'm happy to wear them. But I know what I'm paying for. I know the association of Rolex is, the Masters Golf Tournament. I'm paying for Tiger Woods and I'm fine with that. I'm aware of it and I'm fine with it. And to me, they make a very robust watch. And for 10 grand or whatever you pay, you're not going to be disappointed. It's going to keep time well. It's going to look great. It's going to wear for 50 years, blah, blah, blah. And I don't know if you saw the interview that was done with Dufour. Well, it is Dufour, right? The guy, the CEO of Rolex.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he was asked various things, and one thing about Rolex that I do like, if you look on the website, there's no person in a white coat there. There's no talk really of watchmaking, really. They talk about, what they make, but they never tell you that a guy is hand making and hand. No, the perception might be that, but they never say that. They're all about we use the best technology, and if that's Elon Musk's robot or CNC machines, as we all know. We're an
True.
industrial company, make a great product. Get over it. It's like Mercedes-Benz, you know?
True, true. That's very much true. It's another way of looking at watchmaking. It's manufacturing excellence that
Yeah.
you will find at Rolex, that you will find at Omega.
Yep.
It's my love mark. Um, not only because I have worked there, but yes, you don't have to pretend to be someone else, you know? And circling the conversation back to Laurent Ferrier, that
Yep.
was exactly the point when we launched the brand. Even though Laurent is a trained watchmaker, unlike what some people said or wrote, he is a watchmaker, but we didn't build up a fake watchmaker story, pretending that that old man was sitting at night and doing his own movements. We said, no, no, we are not. I told them, I told Michel Enrico, the investor, etc., said, we are not going to start that bullshit.
Yeah.
We stick to a true story. And that story was that Laurent designs the watches, and he does the watches that he wants to do, and that's the most important part of all this. Simon Brett is a good example because it's a very clever and very good execution of a brand concept.
Correct.
And as you rightfully said, there is no added value pretending that you do everything in-house by hand, etc. Because, by the way, it's not at all what the watchmaking industry was in the old days, for
Correct.
2, 3, 400 years ago. You had the dial maker, the case maker, the hand maker, etc., etc. And at the end, there was one guy, which we today call a brand or a maison, assembling all this and
Correct.
selling it under his own or her own name. And that's the story. Today, everyone wants to pretend to be a manufacturer. Everyone is pretending to do this and that in-house and by hand, etc. The man's hand can execute wonderful things in craftsmanship, but the man's hand is the worst enemy of precision. And as you just rightfully said, Rolex and Omega are the world champions of chronometry. And why? Because it's not done by hand, it's done by machines to the best precision that you can achieve in mechanical watchmaking.
Yep. No, I think that's an awesome place to leave our chat today. I've got a lot I want to chat to you about privately, but I will end the interview today for the podcast. But really, as ever, appreciate your time and what a career you've had and what a nice guy. I remember when I was interrailing many years ago and we were in Paris, and a guy said he was off his face, stoned, right? And he said, "It's nice to be important, but it's more important to be nice." And somebody like yourself that's got the caliber, the experience, the context, all the rest of it, one to find an hour and a half or whatever it's been to talk to me is wonderful. To share your experiences and just to be a nice person, like that is unfortunately today, as you know, very, very rare. Forget our industry just in
Thank you.
general. People have an arrogance that I am this guy, I do all this, and you should be so lucky to speak to me. Almost this hierarchy, as it were. And I don't believe in that bullshit. Like I believe in meritocracy, and just because and I think Vianney Holter, to go back to him full circle, when I went to see him in Saint Croix, I forget, it's Saint Croix? I think it might be Saint Croix. And I went there intending to speak to
Yep.
him for half an hour, whatever. It was 3 hours, ended up taking around the whole factory, the manufacturer, showing what's going on. And at the end, look, I love the fact that someone young is so passionate about the watch industry because I'm passing the baton back onto you. And for someone like that to say that and to have the time and to find the time, there was no talk about business or what might happen. Back to your point, and there's something really quite magical about that is in our industry. We have this convergence of precision, of manufacturing, of artisan, of craftsmanship, of history, heritage. I personally don't believe there's any better industry and more important industry in the world. I think it's just phenomenal. And look, when anyone makes a bit of money, one of the first thing they do, particularly men, is they buy a luxury watch. And once they buy one or they buy an Apple Watch, they tend to get on the treadmill and become something that they have and pass on. And it marks certain moments in their life when they get married, when they're a certain age, when they make a certain amount of money, sell a business, etc., etc. And it's a wonderful business. And unfortunately, it's corrupted by people who I believe in my side, the secondary market, would sell concrete if concrete was a low barrier to entry and easy to make money from. But they choose this because it's sexy and Rolex and Cartier and Omega already do all the hard lifting. So all they've got to do is go, oh, like, here's the thing, I ship a thing, I made 500,000. Thank you very much. 500 quid. Well, and it's like, all right, cool. But I love talking to people like you, and to say back to you, more importantly, to just be as humble as you are and nice. And I reached
Thank
out to
you.
you on LinkedIn, and you just decide to go, hey, I'll do this. And no, oh, how many downloads did you get? How many, like, Honestly, like that just drives me nuts. Like maybe a lot of people watch, maybe they don't, but thankfully I had a very nice conversation, met a like-minded person who's passionate about what he does, and thankfully it's in the same industry as me. But that's the whole point of this, you know? You clearly have a burning desire to use the pardon the pun, to pass the baton on, to educate people, to show people what the business is all about. And it comes from a pure place, and you've got unbelievable experience that people need to listen to. And the fact that you're not that known to me is wild and to the wider world, but probably that's the way you want to keep it, I suppose, that you kind of in the shadows, right? But you're the guy that's moving all the pieces, right? I'm gonna be watching wonders and like, I see.
Thank you, appreciate a lot. And I hope we make it to meet in Manchester.
Please. No, I'd love to. Thank you so much for your time.
You're most welcome. Thank you, Charles.